you're a mix of Kazakh and Uyghur. And is it sort of like normal that people have this type of mixed identity, or have you ever been in a situation where people might expect you to be more Kazakh?
All my life. Yeah. You know, like
Wow.
teachers at school, like Kazakh language teachers at school, they were like questioning me, like, why don't you know? Like, why don't you speak Kazakh? Like, you're a Kazakh. And every time I try to explain that at home we don't use it, like, unfortunately. And now only like growing up, I feel like I would love to use it like freely because now I understand it. I can talk in it, but it's not as free as I want it to be. And sometimes I'm just like, I probably not like belong here and not here. Like I'm somewhere in the middle.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Sabina Turan, who is from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Born and raised in Kazakhstan to an Uyghur mother and Kazakh father, Sabina joins us to talk about her experience growing up in the Central Asian country, misconceptions about her identity and culture, and her recommended itinerary for your next trip to Kazakhstan. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. Now, for this episode, we are going to speak to a guest who is from a country that we haven't featured on Proudly Asian just yet, and this is why I'm so excited. And if you have not caught that during the intro just now, this country is actually the 9th largest country in the world and also one of the least densely populated countries around. And which country is it, you ask? It is Kazakhstan. So without further ado, let us bring in Sabina, who will be telling us about her own experience growing up in this Central Asian country. So welcome to Proudly Asian. Sabina, how are you? How's the weather in Kazakhstan? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Hi. So it finally feels like spring now. Because like for the past few days, it was raining and today it's cloudy, but very warm. Yeah.
Wow. So last time I remember when we talked, you were telling me how it was freezing and it was still snowing and it was kind of a few weeks ago that we were talking about.
Exactly.
And now within a few weeks, the season has changed finally. And I know that you are in the middle of like celebrating the new year in Kazakhstan as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually it's called Nauruz. And a lot of Turks nations like Uzbeks, Kyrgyz, Turkish people and so on, they also have the same New Year celebration, like among all of these nations. Yeah. So it's very interesting. And actually it's the time when the day and night, they are equal. Yeah. And yesterday was that day. Yeah.
Oh, so you're finally getting, I'm assuming, maybe longer days? Is
exactly.
that right?
Yeah.
Right, that's cool. I hope you are having a lovely festive season. But now, of course, for this episode, I'm so curious myself, and I can imagine for our listeners as well, to be finally speaking to someone who is from Kazakhstan. And it always really excites me when I get to talk to people from a country that I've never been. I love it when I get to hear about like cultures that I am not in any way familiar with. So thank you so much for taking taking the time to come on Proudly Asian to tell us all about your own experience. But to get started, it's only fair for us to start off with a set of questions that we ask all of our guests on Proudly Asian, which is tell us about your background, Sabina. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, I'm from Kazakhstan. I am 25, and I have been living and growing up in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's Almaty. Yeah, it's surrounded by mountains. There is lots of lakes around the city. So the nature here is just stunning. Yeah, and actually, Kazakhstan is located between two of the largest countries in the world. It's China and Russia. And that's why we also have influence of both of these countries. Yeah.
So geographically, Kazakhstan, I mean, just to help our listeners figure out where Kazakhstan is kind of sandwiched between Russia and China, and it's pretty much a landlocked country, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
I do have a follow-up question though, because geographically, Kazakhstan is located in Central Asia, but I'm wondering if people in Kazakhstan actually see themselves as Asian culturally. I'm only asking this because when I was telling someone that we are going to have a guest from Kazakhstan, and the person's question was like, oh, that is in Asia? That is Asia? So that kind of got me curious. Sometimes from a geography standpoint, it is in Asia. But then as we always talk about on Proudly Asian, geography, nationality do not necessarily dictate the cultural identity, right? So I'm just wondering if people in Kazakhstan see themselves as Asian,
Actually, I have never thought about this question. Maybe for the past year, I think I've just started to mention that when Asians started to get some awards, for example, in Oscar and so on, I felt how Kazakhs, people in Kazakhstan, they also feel related to this. They feel that wow, Asians, go Asians. Yeah, they feel very supportive. They repost all the news that are coming up about Asians that are conquer different platforms, even in movie spheres and so on. Yeah. So that's why I would probably say yes. Most of us, probably most of us feel like Asians.
Wow, that's a very good point that you just brought up there. It's more visibility of different representation of Asians actually helps connect people or helps remind people, maybe they are Asian.
Yeah.
The fact that for the longest time we never really saw, different types of Asians on big screens or on major media platforms. People might not even know that they belong culturally or I mean, just basically going back to what we always talk about on Proudly Asian, if we don't see ourselves on mainstream media, I mean, we would just go into this whole existential crisis. It's do we belong? Am I the odd one out? So that's a very good point that you brought up there, and how, more representation and more visibility of Asians around the world can help unite people, or, can help people rethink their cultural identity. Now, so going back to your experience growing up in Kazakhstan, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what it was like for you, any particular moments that you want to highlight with our listeners through your childhood. What was breakfast like for you? How was school for you?
So actually, the Kazakhstan is multicultural country, and that's why I was growing up. Firstly mentioned, my dad is Kazakh and my mom is Uyghur, so I kind of the mix of two nations, but they are both from the same identity. I mean, Turk identity. But same, it's two different nations. And even like starting from there, from my family, from my home, I was brought up like in mixed even traditions, some identities and so on. I mean, I was actually, it's very strange, but I was closer to my mom's side, like growing up. And it's very, at one point when you are becoming older, you have this crisis of identity because you just feel like that you are closer to these relatives and you might feel like them more, but then you feel like relation to your dad's side and so on. And sometimes it's very difficult because I also have like lots of friends who are Korean, who were like born here, grew up here, the same as Russians. We have lots of Russians because after the Second World War, we had like a lot of people who were sent here, and for like lots of generations, they like have been living here, settled here, and that's why I think it's actually very interesting because we don't have this. We don't separate even the holidays. I mean, for the few days it was our like Turks nation New Year, and we celebrated all together, like with all Slavonic like nations, and the same as Turks. And after a few weeks, I think it will be I think in April or May, it will be Easter, and we are also going to celebrate it all together because like it's been like that while I was growing up. But I know that it's not like that everywhere because Almaty is the biggest city in Kazakhstan. So that's why it's so diverse. I mean, of course, in some smaller cities, even if we're talking about traditions, they are more conservative, they are more traditional. And but in Almaty, it's actually the ex-capital of Kazakhstan. Yeah. And actually, like local people call it like the cultural capital of Kazakhstan because we have lots of universities here and lots of like people of art, people of science, and so on are like have been living here like for centuries. So that's why there are lots of students coming up to Almaty even to study.
Wow. So basically, Almaty sounds like this cultural capital, but it's also like the hip and the trendy place to be in Kazakhstan, right? And, from what you just described there, obviously we get the picture that Kazakhstan is a very multicultural country. Like we have not just, the Kazakhs, but also, Russians, as you mentioned, Koreans who were also born and raised there. So that's definitely giving us a picture and, some clarity in terms of the cultural diversity in the country that existed there. But I'm just wondering for yourself, right? What was typical breakfast like for you? Like, what did you grow up eating, in such a multicultural country?
That's a good question because, yeah, like we absolutely have the mix of like the dishes, the even things we eat. Because even now I see the difference like in families. Now I'm married and I see how different like the main course is in my husband's family and how it's different in my like own family. So I think it was like usually pancakes, sausages, I mean, some omelets, um, some cereals with milk sometimes. Yeah, so like it wasn't anything extra. Yeah, but we have kind of our own type of, I don't know, do you know this or not? But in Kazakhstan, we eat horse meat.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
and
see.
we have the kind of the variation of sausage, and it's called kaza. And it's made of horse meat. And sometimes we also had this for like breakfast, lunch, or dinner, like just to cut it and eat it.
That's interesting. I mean, it's definitely like you mentioned a mix. There's pancake, there's cereal. I feel like cereal is somehow the universal breakfast food for everyone. What about schooling for you? I mean, being in such a multicultural country, there must be a lot of classmates who just look completely different, or they might speak completely different languages as well. Is it normal in schools in Kazakhstan? And are there any like compulsory language or subjects that you all had to study?
That I think will be a very long section. Yes, because I
We
have
can try to
so much
condense
to
it.
say. Yeah, I have so much to say about like school years and being like surrounded by people from different nations. And fun fact that in Kazakhstan we have Russian and Kazakh schools. Yeah, so I studied in Russian school. So Kazakh language was like an compulsory lesson for us, but it wasn't on that level that we could really learn it, to speak it freely and to use it, yes, whatever we want. Yeah. And also in my class, I think it was like maybe 3, 4 people who are actually Kazakh. Others like different nationalities, like as I mentioned, Korean, Russian, Germans, Azerbaijans,
Oh,
and
wow.
Armenian. Like, so we had so many nationalities in just one class. So that's why, the common language for us to speak is Russian. Yeah, and because I was also raised in the family who are from 2 different nationalities, we also were speaking in Russian and still actually speaking and using Russian language, even among my siblings. Yeah, we
Right.
chat in Russian. Yeah.
So the dominant language in Kazakhstan, you would say, is probably Russian before Kazakh, right?
No.
No.
Yeah, because I was thinking like that, and I was thinking like that like my whole life before I entered the university. And I really like at that point at the age of like 16, 17, I realized that it's not how I see the world. It
Oh,
was only
wow.
like in Almaty, probably Russian is more dominant. But as I mentioned before, lots of students from different cities are coming to study here. And I was so surprised when I started to see some people who they even don't understand like Russian. They know only Kazakh. And I was like, wow, really? And I studied in English. So that's why on our first like lectures and so on, we were talking during the lesson in English. And after, I started like right straight away talking in Russian, and they were like, "What?" And I was like, and they started to talk with me in Kazakh, and I was so bad at Kazakh language at that time. And I was like, okay, let's just continue talking in English. Yeah, but it was something very surprising for me.
That is so
Yeah,
interesting because your family is basically a hybrid of two nationalities and two cultures, right? And
yeah.
then the language that bridges both sides is Russian. And then at school now, because you don't speak much Kazakh, and then your classmates didn't speak much Russian, and the only language that bridged both sides now is English. That's so interesting.
Yeah. But of course, like it's rare. Like I still can say that it's very rare when you see the person who like doesn't understand Russian. I mean, there are the type of people who are just like the category of people who are not talking in it, who are not using it, but they understand it because fortunately or unfortunately, yes, like it was everywhere while we are growing up. And actually, we got our independency only like 23, 24 years ago. Yeah. So that's why now we are kind of trying to build up and take all the like Kazakh things back to our lives. Yeah.
I see. So I remember when we talked previously, you would say culturally Kazakhstan could still be quite influenced by, the Russian culture. And now, as you mentioned, after the independence, more than 2 decades ago, there has been, kind of like a general sense of like people in Kazakhstan wanting to embrace more of that like Kazakh culture, raise the profile of the Kazakh language. So that makes me sort of wonder because you yourself, you're a mix of Kazakh and Uyghur. And is it sort of like normal that people have this type of mixed identity, or have you ever been in a situation where people might expect you to be more Kazakh?
All my life. Yeah. Like
Wow.
teachers at school, like Kazakh language teachers at school, they were like questioning me, like, why don't you know? Like, why don't you speak Kazakh? Like, you're a Kazakh. And every time I try to explain that at home we don't use it, like, unfortunately. And now only like growing up, I feel like I would love to use it like freely because now I understand it. I can talk in it, but it's not uh, as free as I want it to be. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, yeah, like people here, like in Kazakhstan, they are questioning. Like even my dad, now I think we can just go to the cultural, like interesting things because my dad is the only boy of the family. And it's very unusual. I mean, when the fact that he married the like woman who is not his nation, and I mean he's kind of the person who needs to continue their family and so on, but we are not now like 100% Kazakhs. And that's why even like some relatives were questioning it, like, why? And even here we have the term like Shala Kazakh, and it means like you're partly like when you're talking and you're mixing, for example, Russian and Kazakh words and so on, because you're trying to like convey like the message. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have like this term even like for people who are not
Completely
fluent.
Kazakh.
Yes,
Is
fluent
it,
using.
does it bear any negative meaning, the term?
I have never felt it as negative. Yeah,
Mm.
because mostly people are just making fun of you.
This experience that you're just describing here, it's very similar to, what a lot of like Asian Americans or like maybe Asians who grew up outside Asia experience themselves as well.
Yeah,
Like, especially maybe like those who grew up outside Asia and then when they, at some point, they come back to Asia, living in their so called motherland. And if they are not completely fluent in their so-called mother tongue, which, doesn't exist, but that's what people would call it, right? And then people in Asia might start making fun of their accents, they were like, it's not really, it's like, you don't know how to speak, like, that's not the right way to do it. But then sometimes they might not mean it as completely offensive, or like they
yeah,
might not mean it as like criticizing the other person, but sometimes, this type of, teasing and interaction, it could sometimes compromise the confidence of the person who is trying
exactly. Yeah.
right? And then also, it's just so funny how, you know, your experience being a mixed in Kazakhstan, it sounds like, you know, what a lot of our Asian American friends would experience in America as well, where maybe in America, they might feel like they're too Asian, but then when they come back
Mhm.
or when they go to Asia, they might feel like they're too American. So you yourself are also wearing different cultural hats in your own home country in a way.
Yeah. Like I feel like this too. Like sometimes you are
Yeah.
just like when you're with your, for example, Russian Korean friends, you feel like that you completely understand them and you feel like, but sometimes, of course, there are some differences and we're just like, oh, probably I'm too Asian. Like, I mean, too. And also, you know, Kazakhstan is their East Asians. Like, you know, we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that we got from even Middle East countries and
Mm.
so on. Yeah. Even like that we have strict parents and even parenting. And yeah, we don't talk a lot with parents for like very personal topics and so on. So, I mean, that's where I see the difference. And sometimes I'm just like, I probably not like belong here and not here. Like I'm somewhere in the middle. And yeah,
Yes, yes, the in-betweeners or you know,
yeah.
never enough for either side, but then you are both of them as well. But I'm just wondering, is it common to have a lot of like maybe mixed Kazakhs in Kazakhstan, or like would you say your case it's a rare case in the country?
I mean, now throughout the time, like the tendency is changing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
now the parents are not so and it's interesting, you know, because like worldwide now the age of marriage is changing, like, and people are getting married later and later. And I think this factor is also influencing to parents and relatives react to your future partner. Like sometimes you're
Mm.
just like, oh, you are in your 30s, is he, I don't know, Russian, German? Okay, let it be. Let it be. Like, even, I don't know, some maybe American, and you will not be here, like, and you will be living in different continent, but they're like parents and elder generations, they are really worrying about, like,
Mm.
is your child like will ever get married. So yeah, I think these factors kind of made this less tense. I mean the
Mm.
nationality question, but I still see that in small cities it's like people will judge you probably.
For being mixed.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Or yes, or will judge like parents and I have few couples that I know, and they have kind of issues, not in the couple, but kind of outside when relatives are saying like, "But you have to do this tradition," but no, like we are going to do this and that, and everything is getting even more complicated when there are children there.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like multiracial marriages and relationships. I get you. Like, there's always this like cultural dynamics and tensions in multicultural families. So I completely
Yeah.
understand that. So that's very interesting. So basically, when it comes to like Kazakhstan, the cultural hierarchy, would people still consider, or for example, for parents, right, when their children are looking to marry someone, like their first choice would still be like, oh, the best would be to marry a fellow Kazakh. And then would there be like a second tier? It's like, oh, second tier, Russian, okay, maybe. Oh, Korean, maybe. you know, like, is there like a kind of like a preference there?
Yeah, like I know that one of my uncles, he told his daughter that if he a Muslim, like if he's at least our religion, it will be fine. Yeah. So
Mm,
some people maybe they are not so stick to the nation preferences,
mm,
nationality preferences, but they would love their future son-in-law
mm.
to be like at least the same religion. Yeah.
I see. And also out of curiosity, right? From like the hierarchy standpoint, because, in Asia, we always have this. I mean, it doesn't apply to every place in Asia, but in Asia, there's always this like running joke of like, oh, white privilege. Like white people would normally get treated favorably. I'm also wondering if that's the case for Kazakhstan. Like, for example, your white Russian friends be considered, prettier or like get treated more favorably? Or is it relatively equal because you guys are so used to seeing the many diverse
Yeah.
types of people in the country?
Uh, I mean, even in teenage years, when you have when the body changes start and so on, and of course you start to compare yourself with all your classmates, and I don't know, is it like everywhere like that? But I think Asians, they're not changing a lot. Like they are not becoming feminine like in 2, 3 years. Like I mean, in their 13s, 14s, and but for example, my Russian friends, they are becoming like very feminine. Their body shapes change and so on. And of course, you think that something wrong with you. You're just like, like why? Like why am I not changing? Why do I still look like a child? Yeah. And I think we have this tendency maybe for some, and it's very interesting because I think it's the tendency mostly spread among like women who
Mm.
are trying for example, I know that many women, they are doing the like kind of surgeries to have like second like eyelid, or how
Oh,
does it
wow.
call? Yeah. Or yeah,
Like
they are
taller
trying.
nose,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Some of them, they're like deleting this kind of vicious what, like,
the
yeah.
face fat.
Yes, yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. Wow.
So, but it's not like very spread away. I mean, just saw some cases where people are trying to be like to look more European. Yeah.
I
But
see.
but now actually there is a tendency to um, even cherish and kind of celebrate that you are Central Asian person. Like
Hmm.
now we have kind of the trend to wear this like national hats and so on.
Oh.
So even for the last few days, because it was New Year, I have seen lots of like teenagers, like youngsters who were wearing some costumes and national jewelry and things like that.
Mm.
And yeah, it looks very great and it feels very great that
It's
people are
beautiful.
changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since we were talking about facial features as well, I also noticed like people from Central Asia, they also have like most of them that I've seen, they also have beautiful eyes. Like they could have eyes with different colors as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like as far as I know, the history, like we had the before the Mongolian invasion,
Mm-hmm.
um, like centuries ago, like most of Kazakhs, like they were described as blonde people, like
Mm.
with blue eyes, and yeah, so they were like white, you know. But of course, they had like Asian features, like for example, the shape of the face and so on. But the color of hair, eyes, it was very common to have very light yes, colors. And
Mm.
yeah, now I have some few still have some few relatives who are very they have like green blue eyes. Yeah, so and it's very it looks very cute, I think. And of
Yeah.
course, you know, when you have some relatives who are like close to you and you're just like, oh, we have this in our genes. So maybe. Yeah.
It's like the same family sitting together for dinner and then everyone has different eye colors, but still, like you guys are all like blood relatives, you're all related.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's so interesting. I mean, now that I want to ask a little bit more about the cuisine, you know, the food in Kazakhstan, because earlier you mentioned a little bit about, you know, breakfast. You guys have a mix of different dishes, but I'm just wondering if there is kind of like a national dish in Kazakhstan, or like are there some, you know, common dishes, ingredients, or even cooking techniques that you know of?
Actually, we have our national dish, and it's called beshparmak.
Mm.
And it's like a pasta. Yeah, but
Oh.
it's like handmade pasta, and it's very thin, and then you just have a lot of different type of meat like on the top of this dish. And I know that in some regions they eat it with hands, because actually
Mm.
bes parmak is translated as five fingers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's
And but
Kazakh language, right?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And actually, it was like strange for me when I firstly like saw when people are eating it with hands, and I was like maybe some fork or like something. Should I bring it to you? Yeah, but actually, then I like people around me, especially like older relatives, they told me that actually it's how like it's a proper way to eat it. Yeah, but of
Mm.
course, like in Almaty, because like we became like less
Nomadic,
traditional.
right?
Yes, nomadic, traditional. I think we just yeah, it seems something strange for us when we see
Mm.
these kind of things, but still and you know, when it was like nomadic lifestyle, you have to boil like and steam it like for like a lot of hours, I mean the meat.
Mm.
Yeah. So the meat that we eat, it's most of the time it's horse meat,
Mm.
lamb, and beef. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, if we're talking in terms of our like national dishes, but
Mm-hmm.
of course nowadays, like most of youngsters, they eat like chicken, duck, like yeah, and because it's, you know, it's lighter, and
Yeah.
sometimes people like when they were living like deserts in yurts and they had this nomadic lifestyle, of course this type of meat, I mean the heavy one, it made them feel like warmer,
Warm.
keep the
Yeah.
warmth. Yeah, and that's why now of course we kind of don't need this anymore.
Mm.
And for example, me and my husband, we prefer to eat it maybe once a week or twice, like, yeah. But still, parents like are insisting, like, you have to eat it. You have to, like,
It's
what
the
about your,
tradition.
yeah, like something like the, how do we call it? Uh, Iron in your
Mm.
blood will just low down and get low, and you're just like, okay.
And I mean, when it comes to like cooking techniques, right? You mentioned there's a lot of like boiling or steaming. Are there any other techniques, like is deep fried food common in Kazakh cuisine? You know, because for other countries, there could be like a predominantly, you know, deep fried dish or like dishes everywhere. So I'm just wondering, like, does it apply to you guys as well, or like what are some of the more
Yeah,
common
like
techniques?
now I mentioned my like Kazakh side of mine, but in Uyghurs culture, and you know, Uyghurs like kind of the motherland. It
Mm,
was in China, like territory of China, and
right.
that's why, yeah, like my favorite dish ever is it's called lagman, and it's like tomyan lagman, so it's fried noodles. like also like with pepper, like with cabbage. Yeah, so it's
It
even
sounds
now,
good.
like, and yeah, even
I'm
now when
hungry
I'm
now.
thinking about that, yeah, exactly. And every time, it's something that you like. I have never felt that it's enough.
Mm.
Sometimes you start to eat like the same thing every day, and at one moment you're just like, I don't like it anymore as I did it. Like, but no, not with this
You have this
dish.
every day. And is your favorite your mom's cooking or?
Exactly. Yeah. For example, it's very interesting, like the difference between how my mom cooks and how my mother-in-law cooks. Because my
Oh yeah.
mother-in-law, I see how like more kind of Russian oriented
Mm.
kind of type even of dishes she cooks, and she's so good at it. And the same as my mom, like she is so like good at cooking some Eastern dishes
Mm.
rather than like this Russian soups or something like that. And it's very interesting because I was raised only like eating some mostly Eastern kind of food, and now when I eat my mother like when my mother-in-law cooks, and I'm just like, wow, it's so good, like,
Yeah.
and it's so different. And
You get the best of both worlds.
exactly, yeah.
Now I want to move on to, obviously the misconceptions about Kazakhstan, right? It's just like sometimes when you travel abroad and you tell people that you're from Kazakhstan, I can only imagine how many questions you would be getting, from foreigners, from people from other countries. Oh, Kazakhstan, is it XYZ? I mean, I don't even know what those questions could
Yeah,
sound like, because sometimes it's like when people don't have much of a conception about a place, they might not even have misconception about
yeah.
that place. But I know that you have gotten quite a few questions. So can you let us in on, what kind of questions or even weird questions that you would get whenever you tell people that you are from Kazakhstan?
Yeah. The first like common misconception is that Kazakhstan is in Russia. Yeah,
Mm.
so people I think like it was, I mean, we were the Soviet Union and we were like the together, like kind of,
Mm.
but a lot of people, they still don't know that we are like separate, and we have been separate like for a lot of years. I think it's kind of the stereotype that people have also, that they need to, especially when they are coming to work here or to study here, they firstly they are trying to learn Russian language, not Kazakh one. Yeah, and like to talk daily and so on. And sometimes, yeah, in some regions it's like that. Yeah, it will be easier for you to talk in Russian, but in most regions of Kazakhstan there are like people who are talking in Kazakh language, and that is a misconception, yeah, that you have to know Russian, yeah, to feel
Mm.
um, yourself like comfortable here.
Wow. And I mean, like you said, most people also speak English. So I guess,
Actually, not.
oh
That's
no.
also
Okay.
the misconception. Yeah, because in Central Asia, it's, as I mentioned before, in big cities, you will probably find people who speak English and who could help you, like to find the place, who would like show you the direction. Sometimes I feel like the tendency that, oh, now there are lots of youngsters who can speak English, and I feel so happy about that. But then I just like turn myself like to other parts of Kazakhstan, and I don't see it at all. And I'm just like, okay, so probably
Oh,
it's because like we are living in a big city. Yeah.
I see. So maybe there's a tendency that people might have some sort of understanding or might some ability of English language in Almaty, but not in a lot of other places in Kazakhstan. And you also mentioned one of the misconceptions or like questions that you got asked was that people would be asking like, oh, do you guys still ride horses every day and live in yurts? Do you get this a lot?
Fortunately not, because I think the kind of all the social media things made this more certain that we are not, that we are like, we are just the regular people who has their own flats, houses, and like some living complexes and things like that. Even, I don't know, sport cars and things like that. So it's not, it's not something that we are just, I know, see only in Fast and Furious movies and so on. Yeah, but yeah, like we got the questions like that few times, and most of them, it were people like for like more like elder generations, and probably the people who are not using the internet like much or something like that. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I mean, overall, do you feel there's enough understanding about Kazakhstan and its culture? And if not, is there something that you want people to know more about Kazakhstan?
Actually, the people from Kazakhstan are extremely talented. I think the fact that we have the mixture of different languages, different, like even completely different sounding languages, we have lots of people who can sing, who like has the sense of rhythm and the sense of like even hearing the music without reading it, yeah, without knowing how to read it. And I think it is because like we were raised like in bilingual or even trilingual like surrounding environment. Yeah, and by the way, only now we are kind of separating from Russia in terms of the show business, you know?
Oh,
And yeah, because few decades ago, if you want to become famous, you have to go there and to build up your career there. If
to
you are like,
Russia.
yeah, exactly. But now, thanks to the internet, thanks to the social medias, now like we have lots of artists who are just doing their things here. They are not like they don't have to leave their homeland just to build up there and to make their dreams come true. Yeah.
And I know previously you also mentioned there was a Kazakh singer or personality who made it big internationally, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what's his name again? Maybe our listeners should check him out as well, because last time when we chatted and then I Googled, I was like, oh wow, he's
Yeah.
so handsome.
Yeah. So his name is Dimash Qudaibergen.
Okay, I'll link that in the episode description, but I have it on my screen right now, so I'm gonna show our listeners. This is him, everyone. But I mean, I'm wondering, like, for people who are curious about, checking out the music in
Yeah.
Kazakhstan, would there be any bands or any singers that you would recommend our listeners to maybe get started with?
Yeah. So there is a rapper who is like also kind of famous in like um, actually in a lot of countries, on YouTube, those videos where like Americans react to this kind of like music and so on. And every time like there is a video like that, there is this rapper. So actually his nickname is like Skryptonite.
Oh.
Yeah. So he is, I think, one of the first one who started to mumble rap. Sometimes
Okay.
you just need to Google his lyrics because you're just like, what? Yeah.
I feel like the same can be said about that Taiwanese star Jay Chou. Like I think apparently he's known for singing in a way where people can't really hear a word.
Yeah, exactly. Also, we have now Dequine. She is a singer. Yes, as far as I know, she also writes her music. She performs it, and I mean, she looks very beautiful, and her voice is very mesmerizing. And also some classic one. I mean, the music that I was listening to when I was a child. So the first band I would mention is Dos-Mukasan. So now they are in their 70s, but when I was a child, they have made a lot of good things, good stuff, to listen to. And also we had a wonderful singer. His name was Batyrkhan Shukenov. So he has also very deep voice, and even if you look through the lyrics and so on, so it's very interesting. Yeah, because he has some cultural moments. And by the way, the one person who also adds some Eastern sounds and so on, it's also singer rapper. His name is Jah Khalib. Jah Khalib. Yeah, and also when you listen to his music, you feel both kind of movements, more Western and rapping and so on. Yes, and then some Eastern elements, and you're just like, wow, sounds very
Wow.
interesting. Yeah. By the way, I have to mention him. I'm sorry, I completely forgot
Yes.
him. He is so amazing. Galymzhan Moldanazar, but his nickname is just Moldanazar. So he's doing music in English. So most of the people that I mentioned before, they are doing their music in Russian language.
Right.
Yeah, but the band Dos-Mukasan, they did their music in Kazakh language, and the Moldanazar. Now he is so wonderful. I mean, his music is kind of electro, Daft Punk moods and so on, and sounds so good.
Amazing. Now, I will definitely include the list of musicians and singers that Sabina suggested us to check out in the episode description. So do make sure you guys go check out the music. I'm definitely going to do that after this recording. And going back to the misconception conversation, of course, there are misconceptions from the outside world when they, look into Kazakhstan. But I also know that, within Kazakhstan, there could be bias and misconceptions as well. Just like how on Proudly Asian, we always mention there could be racism towards Asians from the Western world, but within Asia, within Asian communities, discrimination against each other and racism against each other could also exist. And even within the same society, right? There could be bias around gender, around socioeconomic situations. So bias and discrimination can take so many forms and can have a lot of layers. So I'm just wondering if this kind of bias also exists in Kazakhstan.
Unfortunately, only for the past few years, we kind of trying to raise the feminist movement. We have just started to openly talk about how it's like to be a woman, because decades ago and centuries ago, there were the tendency that the man goes first. If it's a family, it might be the man, children, the man, his parents, children, and only then, for example, his wife. Yeah. So actually, I'm glad that it's changing, but of course, unfortunately, it's changing only in some big cities, you know? Yeah, because in some villages, in small cities, the tendency is the same. The people are just, for example, ashamed to get divorced. They because society like will judge them, and there is some misconceptions that if you have kids, like no one will ever marry you again. uh, yeah, so it's very sad, but I feel like now people and like girls and ladies, they are showing how it's how it's like to be a woman in Kazakhstan, and that they are changing it. And it's very like I'm very happy to see how now my some of my friends, they are having children, and I see how even parenting is changing. I mean, before I think even before my generation, it was a tendency that the mother, like, she's doing everything, even if she works. I mean, even if she's not a housewife, she has to do the all the housework, all the like bringing up the children, and at the same time to be very beautiful. Even some parents, when they are talking about the marriage and so on, they are like I have heard so many girls when even moms and dads, they were saying like um, they kind of support the man's side more, even if it's like their own daughter, you know?
Wow. So does that also translate to the workplace as well? Like within the workplace, women might not progress in career as quickly as their male counterparts, or I mean, obviously globally this whole gender pay gap is still very much a thing. Like women don't get paid as much as men. That's not just an Asia thing, it applies to everywhere in the world. Is that also an issue in Kazakhstan?
I mean, yeah, and there is like the top reason is like I would rather hire the man, even if he is not so experienced, even if he is not so good, because especially if it's a young woman, they were like she will just go for her maternity leave like in 2 years, like why? Yeah, and you're just like, mm, yeah.
It's like it doesn't mean they can't work after becoming a mother.
Yeah, exactly. But we still have this thing, and it's very annoying. You know,
Mm.
even if you were start to debate about this, you're just like, okay. I see that it's just meaningless. I see that it's like pointless to talk about that. Yeah. But fortunately, the tendency is changing. But of course, I think it will maybe change in the way we could see it, maybe in a few decades too.
Yeah, at least it's
At least. Yeah.
slowly moving in the right direction. Because, I mean, obviously, even with countries like Japan, I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she was telling me how even now, people would expect Japan to be, quite developed as one of the major economies in the world, right? But then even like for, gender equity for women in the workplace is not quite there yet. It's like, for example, if a woman goes on maternity leave, it will be very difficult for the woman to get back to work or go
Yeah.
back to her same role after her maternity leave. And then they would sort of be forced to become housewives. And the current problem is that in Japan, there are actually a lot of highly educated housewives who could be very good at doing
Yeah.
whatever work that they do in highly skilled domains. But because of this overarching perception about women and about the gender balance in Japan, there are a lot of highly skilled housewives. And of course, we also know that the economy in Japan is also sort of struggling. It's all over the headlines, all over the news. So in a way, it's like, oh, because of this tradition, because of the culture, the country might be also compromising on the overall productivity, the overall economic development I'm just talking about Japan here, but that's a very systemic problem for a lot of countries around the world. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an issue that we need to continue to bring awareness to. And we also hope that collectively in Asia, anywhere else in the world, we will see the profile of women rising everywhere. But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Fires. Now in this segment, yay! Everyone's favorite segment. In this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life. And for Sabina's case, obviously some misconceptions and biased questions that she got asked about her own identity and about Kazakhstan as well. So Sabina, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Let's go. Question number 1. You're from Kazakhstan, Borat?
Yeah, we have like this, like many people will associate, I think, with this movie for a lot of years until maybe we do something like bigger than that movie. But it's not true, guys.
It's not. It's you mentioned the main character is basically acting very stereotypically Kazakh, and not every Kazakh person acts like that, right?
And it's not even like he's not even acting like a Kazakh. Like he is doing some random things and calling himself like that he is from Kazakhstan, and you're just like, what are you doing? We don't do like that. Yeah.
And next question. Do you still live in yurts and ride horses?
Sure. I have the bunch of horses waiting for me to go home after the recording.
That sounds exciting. Question number 3. Where are you from? Afghanistan? Pakistan? Or one of the stans?
Yeah. But yeah, that's actually I think, and people got it very like frequent, especially somewhere like in European countries. You're just like stan thing, so they relate it to any stan that exists, or they might think that we might have a war because like they associate us with like Afghanistan or like and we're like, oh no, thank God.
No, and so do people normally think all the stans are the same?
I'm not sure about that, but I believe that there are some people who do. Yeah.
Right. I do agree that there's very little understanding about Central Asia because I have spoken to a person that I know, and then when I told him about like, oh, I'm very curious about Central Asia, and then the person was literally telling me that, talk to this guy that I know. His wife is from one of the stans. I was like, okay, one of the stans. I mean, you can't even tell me which one it is. So now let us move on to the next question. Question number 4. Is Kazakhstan an Islamic country?
It's not. Yeah. So there are most of people who follow this religion and so on, but officially it's not an Islamic country.
Okay.
Like on the governmental level. Yeah.
Right. And the next question, this one is an odd one. People steal brides in Kazakhstan?
Actually, now on the state level, like according to the laws, it's illegal, to steal some brides and so on. And it's not something that most people are okay with. But it is a tradition, and it was a tradition like that. And actually, originally, before some guys decided to steal some random girls they liked, and then it became the law that you can't do like that. You can go to prison if you do this. But before, in maybe some nomadic periods, Kazakhs, they have 2 weddings. They have like wedding from the girl's side when kind of parents are saying kind of goodbye to their child, and now they are giving her to the husband and so on. And the another wedding from the men's side. And actually, as far as I know, I'm not sure, but as I've heard, many people like they kind of agree to steal the bride, like the bride and groom. They agreed that he will steal her at arranged time and day, because at this point, the girl's side is not like they don't do the wedding from her side, and sometimes it's just a financial moment, when there is not enough resources to do the wedding, 2 weddings, and that's why they can do like this movement, trick the system, trick the tradition. Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. But now it's like most people don't do that anymore.
Exactly, like it's prohibited.
Yes, it's illegal, everyone. Don't even try to do that in Kazakhstan when you travel there.
Yeah.
And the next question, you are Chinese, Korean, or Japanese?
Yeah, like sometimes I feel like people don't know any other like Asian nationalities, and they just start guessing by the most common ones, and they're just like, are you this, that? And you're just like, probably you will never guess, while like I just need to say, yeah.
Exactly. Like a lot of people tend to think, oh, Asians are just Chinese, Korean, or Japanese. And then some people are not even sure if, like, what Southeast Asians are, like whether Filipinos are Asian. So, yeah, I mean, I hope we will not have to answer these kinds of questions very soon. And finally, last question in this rapid bias segment. Do you really eat horses?
We do.
So that's not a bias. And
it's not, yeah.
And that's okay as well, because as you mentioned, it is a tradition, and there is a very real reason why people historically eat a certain meat or a certain food ingredient just to survive based on wherever they are geographically. Thank you so much for doing this rapid bias segment with us. Now, for us to conclude the episode, for our listeners who would like to travel to Kazakhstan, including myself, what will be your advice or ideal itinerary that you would recommend for them? Where should they go?
I mean, obviously, the first place, the first city you have to visit is Almaty. Yeah. Because not only it's modern, but also it's like, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's surrounded by mountains. We have our ski resorts. I guess now the season is over, but probably starting from November till the end of or the beginning of March, you can come over and snowboard, ski, and ice skating. We also have one of the biggest ice skating rank located in the mountains. So and it's so beautiful. Yeah, and I know that during like Soviet Union period, they were like even some Olympiad games were like down there and so on. So probably it's must visit place. It's called Medeo, like the place where the ice rink located, and we have lots of beautiful lakes around the city. So you could even take a tour, 1-2 days tour, like around the city, and I without any doubt would say that you will not regret that. Also, if we're talking like about the whole country, as you also mentioned at the beginning about Caspian Sea that is located in the city of Aktau, also like a magnificent place, and like that most people have to visit. Astana, probably because it's a capital, and of course, like Almaty citizens, like they're just like, oh, like Astana, like, oh, it's because it's also in the north and it's very cold there, and you're just like, um, Almaty is better because like we are ex-capital, and we are just like, no,
Have that
no
like,
Astana, please. Yeah, and
that's
yeah,
the cool
but still,
place.
yeah, like if you want to like get and feel the Kazakhstan from different perspectives, you have to visit that part of Kazakhstan too. Yeah, probably it's like must see for the first times. And yeah, and by the way, it's an interesting fact about Aktau because there is a Caspian Sea. As I mentioned before, we have the national dish called beshparmak, like when you have pasta and meat on it, but they have fish parmak. So they put fish on the pasta. And so it's very like unusual. Yeah. So that's why you could even like for us, like for local people, like it's unusual. So that's why as you might see, even in different like regions and part of the Kazakhstan, it's so different. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, all in all, if there's one activity or one thing that someone needs to do when he or she visits Kazakhstan, it's like, oh, if you have not done this, you can't say you've been to Kazakhstan, right? What would it be? Because like maybe for people who go to Hong Kong would say like, oh, if you did not see the Victoria Harbour, or if you did not eat an egg tart, then you have never been to Hong Kong. For people in LA, if you haven't had In-N-Out, you haven't been to LA. So what is it for Kazakhstan?
First of all, you all have to try horse meat. It's extremely delicious. I mean, and there is almost not fat in it. So that's why, yeah. So it's, and of course, I would mention, that it will be available for everyone hiking, like to go and hike to the mountain, like, and you will not regret it. Yeah, like the
beautiful
views.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we talked about languages earlier in the episode, I'm just wondering if you will be up for teaching our listeners some phrases either in Kazakh or Russian that will be really useful when we visit Kazakhstan.
So I would say like the first one, like how to say hi. So actually we have like two versions more. It's like we use for when we're greeting some elders, but it can be salam. Salam. It's like hi in Kazakh, and привет in Russian.
So hi in Kazakh is salam.
Yes, actually, like the full kind of way of saying it's salimetsuzbe, but it's kind of the long one. Yeah, but we usually use it, as I told you before, like for when it's elder person and so on. Yeah. So salam, it's just like more like for daily life.
So people like salam.
Yeah.
And then it's also common to say hi in Russian. Do you mind repeating that again for our listeners?
Yes. Привет.
Привет.
Привет. Yeah.
Привет. Okay.
Yeah, but don't like say like this.
It's like
I just try. Yeah. Привет.
Привет. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm definitely butchering it. Please don't follow my pronunciation, everyone. I'm just trying. It's my first time trying. And then thank you in Kazakh is
Rasmir.
Okay. I'm not confident enough to try that. So please just follow.
You were doing great. Yeah. So Rasmir, and in Russian is спасибо.
Spasibo.
Yeah, I can also like say how to introduce yourself. Like,
oh,
yeah, just for
leveling up.
Yeah, like just one final phrase is you can say меня зовут and your name, Sabina. Like it's Russian. Меня зовут Sabina.
Меня зовут Isabel.
Exactly. Wow. Great. Perfect. Yeah.
Yay.
And,
okay.
In Kazakh language, it will be Menin adım Sabina.
Menin adım Isabel.
Wow, perfect.
Oh my god. I speak some Kazakh now. I guess I can say no. Actually, just joking. I'm just joking. Yeah. But thank you so much for teaching us these phrases. I'll definitely listen to that part over and over again before my next trip to Kazakhstan. And finally, for us to close out the episode, Sabina, one last question for you. To you, what does it mean to be proudly Uyghur-Kazakh?
I mean, for me, it's just to be a good person, like to be a good kind of representer, maybe not in some traditional and cultural perspectives, but just to be a good, kind person, helping the person who needs help, and in this way kind of represent my culture.
Amazing. And, honestly, no matter who we are, where we're from, being a good person should always be something that we try to be. So that's a beautiful response to the question, Sabina. And thank you so, so much for telling us all about, your Kazakhstan, your experience growing up in the country. And it's been a fascinating chat, just learning everything about the culture and your own lived experience in the country as well. So thank you again for your time, Sabina.
Thank you again. It was such an honor. And of course, as you mentioned, at the beginning, it's just my personal experience, my personal story. But, it's still I feel responsible that because I'm the first representative of Central Asia. But I hope in the nearest future, you will have more and more people from Central Asia. Yeah.
Yes, for those who are listening to this episode, and if you are from Central Asia, please reach out to us. We would love to hear your lived experiences as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.